Big success does not come without big challenges. This popular saying is applicable to India now more than ever. As brand India thrives economically and socially, both domestically and globally, detractors continue to rear their heads. While many are calling this India's decade, Hungarian-American billionaire investor George Soros and his entire network have begun an attack on brand India and on Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Soros is no stranger to involving himself in the economic, social, and political affairs of countries world over. However, his recent comments wherein he wished defeat for the leader of the world's largest democracy have caused outrage throughout India and provoked a number of responses.
Now, if I could only stop at old, rich and opinionated, I would put it away. But he is old, rich, opinionated and dangerous.
In this era of 5G warfare, when wars are fought over keyboards more than on battlefields, and when it is increasingly difficult to distinguish between allies and adversaries, India, the world's 5th largest economy, cannot afford to be complacent. The overwhelming response to Soros' attacks have made one thing clear, however. India will not tolerate these insidious attacks. Mr. Soros and his friends will be well advised to never short the Indian people. His billions will evaporate. Join us as we take a deeper look at who is responsible for these anti-Indian agendas and attacks, and see how and why they are bound to fail. "92-year-old George Soros is not simply an old, opinionated billionaire. For decades, he has spent billions attempting to control the global political landscape. He has been previously accused of conspiring to undermine and topple regimes world over, while at the same time making his billions betting on countries to fail. In his recent comments at the Munich Security Conference, Soros said that India is a democracy, but its leader, Narendra Modi, is no Democrat. The contradiction and hypocrisy wasn't lost on anyone. Alert open source intelligence gathering organization, Disinfolab, recently presented a graphic showing Soros' alleged links to organizations and nation-states that have been working against brand India's rise. In this thread, we see links between Pakistan and disgraced ISI operative Ghulam Nabi Fai, who has been charged in the United States in the past with conspiracy and tax evasion. This isn't the first time George Soros and his Open Society platform are in the news. Recently, a United States-based group named MRC Business, short for Media Research Center, released a shocking study that alleged links between George Soros and his affiliate organizations with 253 media organizations. A report in Fox News quoted MRC business analysts Joseph Vasquez and Daniel Schneider. The journalism group Soros supports have the ability to mold public opinion on practically every continent and in many languages. And now, Soros and his cabal have trained their guns on India.
I could take a view that the individual in question, Mr. Soros, is a old, rich, opinionated person sitting in New York who still thinks that his views should determine how the entire world works. Now, if I could only stop at old, rich and opinionated, I would put it away. But he is old, rich, opinionated and dangerous.
The billionaire investor had pledged $1 billion USD to fund a new international university network to counter nationalist leaders in 2020. Through his extremely vast network, Soros is trying to ensure that his views dictate how the world should function. India, however, in its unequivocal and prompt response, conveyed to the world that it would not so easily cave to foreign pressures. Why should a man sitting in New York dictate how India should be governed?
These designs to weaken Indian democracy will be met with the might of India under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Thank you for joining us, Mr. Soros. With his latest anti-India statement, Soros appeared to be pandering to talking points parroted by Pakistan's military and civilian leadership. Even the country's main opposition party, the Indian National Congress, refused to back Soros's comments. In a rare show of unity, Jairam Ramesh criticized Soros for questioning India's democratic system. This is not the only time that India has been subject to a malicious attack by a foreign individual or organization. The Indian Prime Minister has topped approval ratings year on year and has followed an independent foreign policy divorced from any external pressures. This has rattled the old guard globalists that previously influenced Indian foreign policy. In an effort to advance the anti-Modi narrative, the BBC, or British Broadcasting Corporation, recently aired an anti-Modi documentary. Both the timing and the content of the documentary were questioned. While the BBC showed blatant disregard for the apex court of law in India, the primary goal of the documentary, which has been referred to by many as propaganda, was to undermine Prime Minister Modi's popularity and his credibility ratings. The BBC, however, suffered a blow in its own backyard when Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, flatly rejected the documentary's contention.
Mr. Speaker, the UK government's position on this has been clear and long-standing and hasn't changed. Of course, we don't tolerate persecution where it appears anywhere, but I'm not sure I agree at all with the characterisation that the honourable gentleman has put forward.
There are numerous forces at work that continuously attempt to undermine India's tremendous achievements. Many do not want to see India become the world's third largest economy, which it has been forecasted to achieve. These organizations haven't been able to rally the support they would have been previously able to, however. India is actually receiving more requests for cooperation from other nations than ever before, as a result of its openness and commitment to putting the needs of its citizens before anything else.
The so-called documentary, which was more of a propaganda video, if you like, in a two-part series, was an absolutely disgraceful piece of shoddy journalism.
There have been numerous occasions where the so-called top international media outlets have attempted to portray India negatively. A host of global lists are routinely made that are based on flawed or insufficient data. Most often, this data adheres to talking points of forces that have routinely projected India in a negative light.
And they've done so almost entirely on the basis of subjective criteria, on the basis of personal opinions of expert analysts. In fact, when you unpack these indices, on the objective criteria within the indices, India scores extremely well. The issue here is not India's objective success as a democracy. The issue is people's subjective opinion of India, which is being translated into negative rankings on these seemingly objective, but in reality very subjective rankings like VDEM, like the Freedom House Freedom in the World Index, like the World Press Freedom Index, and like the one I've been studying most recently, the International Religious Freedom Indices coming from the Pew Research Center.
This is also in addition to the baseless criticism India has faced for not blindly following several NATO countries' stance in dealing with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The pressure on India by Western forces, both indirect and direct, was immense. However, the Narendra Modi-led government continued on a path of independent foreign policy. Repeated questions in the U.S. State Department and White House briefings by so-called reporters to corner India's foreign policy were met with swift deflections, a nod to the West's acceptance of India's stance on its strategic decisions. An example was seen recently when a Pakistani reporter who tried to corner India's decision to survey the BBC for its alleged tax issues was shut down by the U.S. State Department.
The Indian government is now raiding the offices of BBC in New Delhi and Mumbai. Your thoughts, any concern?
We're aware of the search of the BBC offices in Delhi by Indian tax authorities. I'm going to have to refer you to to the government of India for any further information about this.
India's successful economic handling of post-COVID headwinds has placed her in a much more secure position than many neighbors and countries throughout the world. As India continues to garner praise for her recent achievements, critics will continue to discount them by any means necessary. Misinformation and other 5G warfare techniques will become even more prominent in years ahead. While India has been giving a befitting reply to enemies along the border, there are many who have betrayed her idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam and have tried to damage the ideas of peace it propagates. A booming brand India can never be completely immune to attacks and threats, coming from inside and outside her borders. Brand India can, however, continue to best arm herself against these attacks. With economic and tech successes coupled with India's global outreach and diplomacy, the Indian model continues to be emulated world over.